Hi everyone, so today I'm going to show you a very simple hat box arrangement, and this will do as all year round, whether it's a birthday, I love you, I'm sorry, happy Mother's Day, even Valentine's Day. And we're going for the pink, we're feeling hot pink here today, and the hat box range that I'm using actually comes in a set of 3. So I'm going to use the larger box, okay? And we're lucky enough with these boxes because they come plastic lined already. So that means that they're going to hold the water. I'm going to use a mixture of fresh flowers, silk flowers and dried flowers. So hopefully if anybody decides to maybe copy this at home, you'll be able to substitute some of the material. Obviously, if you do have any questions, if you're watching this on social media, just put your questions in the comments below. So what do you need? First of all, you need some foliage. I'm using eucalyptus today, and this could be eucalyptus that's sourced maybe from your own garden, but like you could substitute it for something like pittosporum, little bits of ivy, even hedging out of the garden would work. Or again, if you have something growing at home yourself and you're wondering, will it work? Just put it in the comments below. The other thing I'm going to use is a silk bush plant, okay? This little flowering plant is available from a wholesaler who serves people outside the trade. So they're called evergreen silk plants, and they're in Ardee, County Louth. So if you want to Google them, you can contact Charlie there who owns the company, and he'll organise to post one of these out to you. As a little accessory, I have this little bird, and that came from the same company, Evergreen Silk Plants. Now they do come in a box of 6. And then I'm also going to use some dried flowers. But again, if you want to substitute this for fresh flowers, you could use gyp or wax flower, limonium, sea spray, solidaster, solidago, hypericum berry, depending on time of year, what's available, and then obviously what complements your colours. So I just kind of find these are the hot pinks that I'm going to go for today, along with our box. So that's the materials that you need. Now as little accessories, I'm going to use a lollipop stick, but a piece of twig or a waxing stick is actually what this is. But you can buy the lollipop sticks in the likes of Mr. Price. So the lid of the box, I want to incorporate that into the design. So what I'm going to do is place the lollipop stick on the front of the box, and I'm going to secure it with a little bit of sellotape. So I'm going to use that one went away. I'm going to use 2 pieces of sellotape just to make sure that it's nice and secure. And if you find that you need to put 3 pieces on, you can put 3 pieces on. So there's our lid with our lollipop stick secured. Now I'm going to fill our box with some floral foam. So it'll take between 1/2 and 2/3 of a block of floral foam. But the floral foam has to be soaked in water first, and this will take about 60 seconds. Easiest thing to do is 1/3 or half fill your bucket with water, and then drop the floral foam down into the bucket. This has been in there for longer than a minute at this stage, okay? Take it out, it's full of water, it'll be quite heavy, and then you can place it down into your hat box, which as I said is already plastic lined. If you happen to be using a different type of hat box at home, just want to show you these bowls that you can use. It's worth investing in these bowls. They're called bulb bowls. Now we have them for sale on our website, www.flowerschoolisland.com, and if you click under floral sundries, you'll see where I have these for sale. Like there's lots of other hat box styles out there, and they don't all come plastic lined. So ready to start, we have our box. It's filled with foam, it's plastic lined, and if you like to prolong the life of this arrangement, you could also add in maybe another 2 or 3 centimetres of water into the end of the plastic line covering, and that will prolong the life of the foliage, which is the fresh material that we're using today. Your little floral bush, if you have a strong wire, it's easier if you separate them all into individual flowers. So this is the little bush all cut up. So basically with that bush there was 8 open heads, and there was 2 smaller heads. You'll see that when I'm using them today. So you can keep them to one side, and you will need a scissors for cutting up the dried flowers. So they will need to be a little bit shorter, but I'll show you that as we go along. So the eucalyptus branches, if you get some branches from your tree, you're going to cut it up into pieces about 20-22 centimetres, and you're going to remove any foliage that's at the bottom. Now some of my foliage is a little bit shorter, but that'll be fine. There's another one that's a bit shorter. And some of it will maybe have 2 branches, you see, coming out of it there. So you're kind of looking for the overall height, anything between 20 and 22. Try not to be too regimental about having them all exact. It actually looks nicer if you have a little bit of a difference between the lengths of foliage. So first of all, we're going to insert the lid. So we've attached the lollipop stick to our lid. You're looking, that's the back of the arrangement, this is the front. So near the back of the arrangement, I'm going to secure the lollipop stick. I sometimes find it easier to actually hold the stick just so that it doesn't come off the sellotape, just while I push it down into the floral foam, and that just kind of gives me a nice little background to the arrangement. And you can add that in on a slight angle or slant, or even slightly to one side, depending on the design. So now, using my foliage pieces, I'm going to rest them against the edge of the box that they're slightly overlapping. So all these pieces of foliage are all being placed into the floral foam, but they're being placed in kind of slightly angled so that you can see that the top of the leaf is overlapping and kind of trailing a little bit over the edge of the hat box. As I said, if there's a leaf at the end, remove the leaf before you stick it in. That just makes them more secure, because sometimes what happens is if there's a leaf at the bottom, it's inclined to make a big hole when it goes into the foam. So it doesn't really matter what side you start on. You're going to work your way around all the way until I kind of get to the lid here on this side. And then I'm just going to add in another 1 or 2 on the opposite side that I reach around to the lid on that side as well. Now, if you have a couple of smaller pieces, which you probably have when you're cutting it up, if you get a couple of them shorter pieces and just go in close to the lid there in front, and that's just kind of more to camouflage the lollipop stick and the sellotape, just to kind of hide it. But you will find when you add in the flowers, that will be hidden, so don't worry too much about it. So 2 or 3 pieces, just looking for another short one, or you can always cut one a bit shorter if it comes to it, and then we can add that in there. Now, I kind of worked over myself when I was demonstrating that, just so you could see what I was doing. But when you're actually working at home, it's a lot easier if you keep the hat box facing you, that the front is facing you, and that you're adding in the material. I'll just turn it back around. The next thing I'm going to do is one of the pieces of foliage, I'm going to add it to the centre of the arrangement, and this is going to give us a little bit of height. This, again, I removed the leaf. Some of you may prefer to kind of bring it up a little bit higher. It's completely up to yourself what height you want to come up. The extra pieces of foliage then that I have cut, I probably won't use all of these on the table. Kind of around that centre one, I'm going to place in a few of them slightly angled. So they're coming away slightly angled from that centre piece. And what you'll find is that it'll help to hide or camouflage the floral foam that's down into the centre of the arrangement. A few little tips and a little bit of advice. Don't overdo it. Less is best. I would prefer to put in too little foliage, put in the flowers, put in the dried, and then if I felt that I needed more foliage, go back and do it. The worst thing you can do is use up all your foliage and then struggle when you go to insert the flowers or insert the dried flowers, because the dried flowers will have a very narrow, thin stem on them. So I'm just turning this around just so that I can see it kind of like front on, and I'm just going to add in 1 more piece on that side and 1 more piece on the opposite side. And I definitely feel I have enough pieces in there. Now, some foliages that you get from your garden may have a bigger leaf or a smaller leaf than what I'm using today. So again, you can kind of like use your own discretion how much or how little you decide to use. Later on, as I said, we're going to cut up the bush into individual flowers, and to save time, I have this already done. So again, I'm going to work around the outside of the box with a couple of the heads. So I've added one of the larger ones, and I'm just kind of allowing it to kind of rest on slightly an angle over the edge of the box. The great thing about the artificial flowers is you can bend them slightly and you can make them lie over the edge of the box. Now you'll see I'm leaving a fairly big space, you see, between the flowers, and I'm adding in the second one. And again, I give this one a little bit of an angle, a biggish space, and again I'm going to add in the third one. We'll take up our next one. If there's a leaf further down the stem, it is possible to push that leaf, you see, upwards on the stem, but some of them may not actually have a leaf on it, but the leaf of your fresh foliage will take its place. So again, a biggish space, and I'm adding in a fourth one, and I still have a little bit of space, so I think I'll take up one of the smaller heads and I'll add that smaller head in. Now if you think that you'll get away with adding the bigger head in, off you go, or if you think that 4 heads is enough, off you go. Again, we can fill in with extra ones afterwards, so I'm just going to add that one in there, and again I'm just going to give it a little bit of a tilt. So just turn that around that you can kind of see it from different angles, and that's what our 4 biggish heads and 1 small head, that's what I've used. But you can use 5 big heads, or again, if you just use 4 heads, that's absolutely fine. Stick with the motto, less is best. Now what I'm going to do is in the centre of the arrangement, I'm going to stand one of the heads. Do you remember I stood the piece of foliage up in the centre? Very similar to that. So I'm going to stand that flower up in the centre, and again, don't push it down too far, because that's the great thing about artificial. If it's too high, you can just push it down a little bit more to make it smaller, or again, you can leave the extra bit of length on your stem. So I'm happy enough there with that centre flower in the centre. Now still I have 3 flowers left over, and I have 1 small head. So kind of in that area there, that's where I'm going to use up the rest of the heads. But because the lid is blocking my view, I'm just going to turn it around to me while I add these heads in. Now some of the stems I know are going to be a little bit too long, but all I'm going to do is just push them that little bit further down into the floral foam. I pulled out one of the fresh leaves there, which you shouldn't have done. So I'm just going to push it down a little bit further into the floral foam just to get the shape that I want. So I've added 1 in there, I'm adding the second one in here. I'll turn this around to you now in just a second. It's easier if you're actually looking at it. I have a 3rd one over this side, and I still have 1 little head left over, 1 little bud, and I just feel that little space there is nearly talking to me and saying, any chance of adding a little flower in there? So sometimes I say to my students, a small space, a small flower, and a bigger space, a bigger flower. So we add in that extra little kind of like bud that was part of the bush just in there to the outside. So that's the whole bush used up. That is the 10 flower heads used up. So now to add a kind of a little bit more of a shape, dimension, a little bit of texture, okay, to the arrangement, this is where I'm going to add the dried flowers. Now you will need the scissors, and you're going to cut them. I'm actually going to cheat and cut a lot of them at the same time, okay? So I'm just pushing them all that they're near enough the same height, okay? And again, I'm just going to grab them there and cut them all. Now, you'll have loads, and chances are you may have some left over. So if you don't want to cut them all, you don't have to. Now when you're inserting the dried, kind of look for spaces in between the flowers, and that's where you're going to add the dried. Like you can work around the outside. I'm just randomly like sticking them in, you know, that way. But I'm trying to stick in a little dried flower anywhere kind of in a little place in between the silk ones, kind of in among the greenery, filling in kind of like little spaces. And you can see like the point shape gives a lovely texture to the arrangement. Now again, you will find it easier if you're actually looking at what you're doing. So I'm just going to turn that around to myself for a second. I'll add in a few more, and then I'll turn it back around to you. If anyone has any questions on the courses that we run here at the school, you can always give us a ring, 086 26 444 72. You can drop us an email, and the email is info@flowerschoolireland.com. Either if you're working or you're unemployed, you could be entitled to funding, because people always think grants and funding is only available for people that are unemployed, but there actually is grants for people that are employed or self-employed as well. So if you just drop me an email to info@flowerschoolireland.com, I can send on that information to you. A question we get asked all the time is students when they're signing up to our courses is, what about the flowers and the materials? We send all the materials out to you, and you'll get a fresh flower delivery direct from Holland as part of your training. So don't worry about materials. The only thing that you will have to buy if you're doing the fresh flowers is that you will need buckets for storing the flowers in. But again, we always advise the students where they can purchase the buckets wholesale. Now believe it or not, I've used up nearly, I've 1 left over, so I'm going to stick it in. I used up nearly all them dried flowers that was in that little bush. Now the very last, well the second last thing I'm going to do is at the very back of the arrangement, if there happens to be a little bit of a gap or a space, you know when you put your lid of your box security down, if you just get it, again, you may have some left over, I did, is just get a couple of little sprigs of foliage, and again just stick them down there, and you're sticking them down into the floral foam, and this could be done at any stage by the way, and it just kind of helps to camouflage that little gap at the back. It's not necessary, but I always feel it's nice if you kind of finish off the back of your arrangement. And then the very last thing that I'm going to do is we're going to add our little bird, and he has a little clip kind of underneath there. So you can decide to either clip the bird onto the lid of the box, which I think looks nice, but if you prefer, you could always clip him onto one of the dried flowers or the silk flowers and actually have him, I don't know if it's a him or her, and have it as part of the arrangement. So there's your very simple hat box, which I think would be very acceptable to anybody as a gift, or even just to keep for yourself as a present. The fresh foliage will last a good 7 to 10 days. The silk flowers are going to last forever, and so is the dried flowers. So the thing is, you could always replace it. It may mean buying a new block of foam, because obviously the foam will be cut full of holes. Cut some foliage out of your garden and then reuse up the material. So it means you always have a nice flower arrangement in your house. Again, if anyone has any questions, just place your comments below. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. I'd love if you gave me the thumbs up. If you're watching this video on social media, we'd really appreciate if you shared it, because that's how we build up our interaction with the public. And as I said, if you have any questions at all, drop us an email, info@flowerschoolireland.com. My name is Jeanette and I'm from Case Flower School.